Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Welcome to this week's episode of Cloud to Ground. I'm Jeremy Lewan. We're going to get things started with Lightning Round by Joe Snedeker. Now, it's named Lightning Round, and he has something about lightning that he's going to be talking about whether or not you could get juiced if you're in the water, and if you could get struck in the water too. Did you know that about 50 people a year are struck by lightning in the United States? Could you be next? Joe's got some safety tips in this week's Lightning Round.
Hi folks, and welcome to the Lightning Round. And who's this guy? That's Jesse K. He doesn't want to reveal his last name because he's embarrassed to be seen with me.
Oh, that's not the truth. That's not the, K has a better ring to it. So.
All right. So every week we answer your questions. You got to keep them coming. So this week we have a question from Megan Turpak. And you have the big shot anchor voice.
Okay.
At least that's what you hope to be someday, right?
Yes, that's the dream.
So here we go. Give me the question.
Okay, from Megan. How far does a lightning strike travel through water? I swim in Susquehanna and oftentimes find myself in the Tunkhannock Creek. Is there a safe zone, or will I feel a lightning strike that happens in Towanda as it heads into Chesapeake Bay? Thank you for all you do, Miss Megan.
Isn't that a great question? So here's the deal. You mentioned earlier before we shot this, you said, what happens when lightning occurs in your home? What do?
I'd say I would not take a bath. I wouldn't do anything related to water. I don't know.
And that's great advice. So when lightning strikes any component of your electrical system at your house, the wiring, the antennas, the conduits that go into your home, you don't want to be near water because the lightning will travel through the plumbing. Sometimes it's metal. And if you're in water, in a shower or in a bathtub, it'll travel through that liquid and you're dead.
Yeah.
So stay away from plumbing and water when you're in your house during an electrical storm. But what about this? Are you telling me if I sit in this pond, this little fake pond, during a thunderstorm and lightning strikes the waterfall, I'm dead? Or what about a bigger body of water? Lake Erie, lakes and reservoirs around here, the Susquehanna River, the Lackawanna River. What does lightning do when it strikes that?
I guess the fish survive that we
think.
Yeah,
why aren't there dead fish all over the place? We need to talk about this. So what happens? We need some answers. I got them. It's called the skin effect. So when lightning strikes bodies of water outside, and it does, most of the discharge stays near the surface. It'll travel at the top of the lake, the top of the stream, the top of the pond. That's why fish usually don't die.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't go deep. It doesn't go deep. But if a person is swimming in water, as a matter of fact, why don't you demonstrate?
Why don't
you go in there?
Why don't you practice what you preach and show me?
No, I'm just kidding. So if you are in a body of water, a lake, a pond, a reservoir, and that body is struck, the lightning will discharge from that location, usually about 20, 30 feet out. That's not a lot. But if you're struck near lightning and you're floating on the surface, you will be at the threat of being electrified because of that skin effect. It travels on the surface, and if you're floating in the surface, you could get harmed and even dead, I hate to say, from lightning striking bodies of water. So stay out of water. The fish can handle it because of the skin effect. But finally,
scale effect.
The scale.
Something, I don't know.
See what he did there? So let's both jump in here. What the heck? We'll do a little.
Count of three.
A count of three.
When
A one.
I say three. Ready?
One, two, a three. All right. Instead, keep the questions coming. It's weather@WNEP.com. Weather@WNEP.com. Fun science questions, weather questions, and we'll answer them every week. And he is going to run from the bathtub during a thunderstorm and also not go swimming. Right?
Yes, you heard it here first.
Good advice.
Thanks, Joe. Now, not only is it lightning season, but it's also fair season, and our very own Allie Gallo dug deep into the details to find out how extreme weather has affected fairs across the area over the years and historically, coming up next.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Welcome back, I'm Jeremy Lewan. Now, Allie Gallo is up next to explain when fair weather isn't all that fair. Allie, take it away.
Fair season is in full swing here in northeastern and central Pennsylvania. This week, I'm taking a look back at how some of our most popular fairs have been impacted by severe thunderstorms and flooding rains in recent years. Here in Monroe County, the 102nd West End Fair got off to a rocky start. Just 2 hours into opening day in 2024, fair organizers were forced to close for the day.
Opening day, Mother Nature brought us torrential downpours. We had a lot of rain in a very little time.
The cars, all our cars were halfway through the tires of water.
These photos show areas of the fairgrounds flooded with several inches of water. Fair organizers and vendors told Newswatch 16 at the time they had never seen anything like it. That same year, severe thunderstorms impacted opening day of the Lycoming County Fair, too. The storm only lasted a few minutes, but the winds picked up and it dumped quite a bit of water.
It was pretty heavy, had all these benches blow in, and water was coming in everywhere. There's always one time where it just dumps, but hopefully that was the only time. The first day, get it out of the way.
In 2023, opening day at the Luzerne County Fair needed a take two. Severe thunderstorms not only forced fair organizers to close, but the actual fairgrounds took a direct hit.
There was broken tents, there was product everywhere, materials everywhere, probably 33 plus vendors destroyed. Devastation. I can't explain it.
It was all hands on deck to get the fairgrounds cleaned up the next day. But still, some stands and vendors could not return because of the storm damage.
We started right after the storms ended, probably about 8:30-ish. I don't know. It was insane what we went through. And then we probably finished around 2:30. To see this whole thing stand back up again for a second time in less than 24 hours is amazing. The spirit of this fair, the spirit of the volunteers, the spirit of the community service clubs is second to none.
But that wasn't the last of the severe weather during Luzerne County Fair Week in 2023. The finale of the 61st annual fair abruptly came to a halt.
This was the worst. We've been here, I don't know how many years, a long time. And this was the worst we've seen it.
Flash flooding filled the buildings and barns on the fairgrounds, forcing organizers to bus fairgoers out that night.
People were sitting in here hanging out, and then all of a sudden just started coming through. We had about 8 inches of water running through here. Last night, people were sitting on the tables. We had got all the animals, the goats and stuff, and got them to the horse barn was a little bit drier.
In 2021, our Courtney Harrison was in Wayne County covering the GDS fair when flash flooding forced an emergency evacuation of all the animals. Still, 5 years later, she says this was a moment in her career she will never forget.
Lots of the animals are just in panic, not knowing what's happening, but the water's getting deeper and they're just really working to get them out, get them to safety. It's been all hands on deck here as everyone is kind of pitching in. Trailers are showing up, people are showing up, trying to get all the animals to safety. They're going to be taking most of these animals to the Wayne County Fairgrounds. The rest of them are going to be going back to their farms and barns for safety until they can get the water receded here, cleaned up, and the animals can return before the fair resumes. Courtney Harrison, Newswatch 16, Wayne County.
The rain just came so quick and trying to get all these animals out of here to higher ground. So we're going to be taking the pigs to Wayne County Fair for the night, so they'll be safe up there.
In 2020, fairs were canceled because of the pandemic, but we still stopped by the fairgrounds the week the Bloomsburg Fair should have been that year. It was the first time the fair was canceled in 9 years. That time, of course, was because of the flooding of 2011 from Tropical Storm Lee.
Before you knew it, the whole grounds were completely covered with water. And after it receded, we had nothing but mud.
The cancellation of the 2011 Bloomsburg Fair was the first time in its more than 150-year history. In 2020, we spoke to the president of the fair 9 years prior.
Buildings were in one devil mess. The fences were down. Our neighbors' houses were knocked over. it was a disaster.
In 2019, this was the scene early in the week at the first ever Lackawanna County Heritage Fair. Rain put a damper on the inaugural event's second day, but the first day was canceled altogether.
There ended up being enough thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings that they evacuated everybody yesterday. So it's not so bad yet today, but we'll see where it goes. Hopefully it gets better.
That same week in 2019, Oliphant's annual festival, Queen City Days, dealt with the same rain.
Our rides, they got stuck pulling into the field over here. They were sinking, so we had to move into the parking area here. And that took all our parking spots away.
Last week on Cloud to Ground, we showed you the historic flooding of August 2018. Here in Susquehanna County, many homes and businesses were devastated by the flooding.
When I'm not here, my mind's thinking about what's my next step, what have I lost, because I lost a lot, but it'll be okay.
Karen Rafferty lost her home in the August 2018 flooding, but just a few weeks later was working one of the tents at the Hartford Fair. The Saturday of the fair in 2018, $1 of every paid gate admission was donated to flood victims, and there were containers all around the fairgrounds for collections. Those efforts ended up raising more than $16,000 that year. The board of directors of the Hartford Fair later presented a check to Susquehanna County Interfaith, a nonprofit assisting those flood victims.
It was really amazing that the Hartford Fair was willing to step up and say, hey, we love the residents of our community and we want to help them in whatever way we can.
As always, folks in our area proving just how much they care for their friends and neighbors, especially during hard times. Thanks for joining me this week. I'm Allie Gallo.
Thanks so much, Allie. Now, Anthony has a follow-up to last week's segment, and he's still got his markers in hand. More details coming up after the break.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.
Welcome back to Cloud to Ground. I'm Jeremy Lewan. Anthony always does a great job of depicting our weather with his markers, and last week he talked about fronts, but this week he's got more information to share with you all here on Whiteboard Weather.
In this edition of Whiteboard Weather, we are clarifying some things about our weather world. Let's get into it. So if you joined us last week, you would have known we discussed about cold fronts and warm fronts. It's basically the divide between different air masses, cold, dry air masses, warm, humid air masses. So we are done talking about those. What I want to talk about next is two more types of fronts, stationary boundaries and occluded boundaries. So sorry, dry lines, we may have to get into you a different week. Dry lines don't really have too much of an impact on our weather, but if you're curious, let me know and I'll explain it for you. So let's talk about stationary fronts. The good thing about stationary fronts is, well, they're stationary for the most part, but they're kind of tricky. These fronts wobble up and down and can have drastic impacts on our weather. So let's just say you're out in the west, where you got the cold Canadian air to the north and a bit of warm air to the south. Now, when undisturbed, these two air masses will just hang out, chill out. But we know that doesn't really happen in the real world, so you have cold air to the north, warm air to the south. And the front looks something like this. So let's say in the warm air mass, we're in the, let's say, 70s. In the cold air mass, it's more like the 40s. It's not usually this rigid of a boundary. But when giving a forecast, let's say you're in Montana and we're like, oh, it's going to be in the 40s today. Well, if this front lifts a little bit to the north, you can easily be in the 60s and 70s. So that's why these fronts are so tricky. Now, I say the boundaries are stationary when undisturbed. These move a little bit, and they kick off something we called the extra development of an extratropical cyclone. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. I never know where the eraser is, and sometimes that's important. let's say you have a little low pressure that develops, and these usually develop on the east side of the Rockies. So this low pressure that develops, and it moves along this front. Well, that creates little perturbations, and that kicks off the life cycle of what we call an extratropical cyclone. So you have colder air that tries to start moving to the south. So you get a cold front that swings something like this, right? Cold air advancing to the south. And you still got that warm front that's this way, like this. And what do we know about cold air? It's more dense than warm air. Cold air, things can't move around as much, so it's a little denser than with the warm air that's more free-flowing, that has more energy. So this cold, dense air eventually starts trying to catch up to the warm air, and eventually it overtakes it. Then eventually you get what is called an occluded front. You get both fronts that basically catch up to each other, and it looks something like this on a weather map. Now, you've probably seen this on a weather map before. If you ever see a purple front, that is usually something too complex. I usually don't draw these. It's basically the warm air and the cold air meet up once again. And when that happens, the cold air is completely in the warm air, so it completely modifies the warm air, and the cold air is still pretty cold. So there's no thermal divide here. There's no divide between the cold air and the warm air at all, so it settles back in, and the air mass basically takes over itself, and everything is equal once again. So the 40s that you had to the north, the 70s that had further towards the south, ends up being somewhere towards the 50s. So everything comes back in equilibrium, and that is basically what an occluded front looks like. Now, something cool, if it just gets you stuck on to the end of this, something cool that happens with occluded fronts. So let's look at it vertically. So you have the cold air, and this air mass is also cold here, but the warm air gets lofted up high. In some scenarios when this happens, you get warm enough air for big thunderstorm clouds, and when that rain falls through the cold air layer, it turns into snow or more frozen precipitation. But you can get thunder clouds that go into the warm air, so it can be snowing at the same time there's big thunderstorms and lightning, and this, along an occluded front, is where you get, say it with me, thunder snow. So whenever you see thunder snow, that means there's some occlusion going on where it's cold at the surface, that warm air gets forced up. So yeah, now we've talked about stationary fronts. Eventually stationary fronts move and they turn into occluded fronts. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Whiteboard Weather. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Anthony. Kurt's up next with the kids and their questions. Stay with us here on Cloud to Ground. Welcome back to Cloud to Ground. I'm Jeremy Lewan. Sunset on this show brings us a question about nighttime weather. Take it away, Kurt, with science class.
And welcome back to Cloud to Ground. I'm Chief Meteorologist Kurt Aaron. You know, we get all kinds of questions from kids. And this week, we got an interesting one. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Robert, and my question is, how do you know what is going on in the sky at night?
That's a great question. How do we know what's going on in the sky above us, in space? There's a couple ways we can tell what's going on. Ways that involve at the ground, and ways that involve in space. Let's go to science class, get some answers. Come on. Okay, welcome back to the studio. Science class continues with this. Do you know what this is? This is a satellite. So there's different ways that we can keep track of what's happening in the night sky. One of them is with satellites. Satellites are awesome because they not only can look into deep space to see what's going on, but they can also turn their cameras and zoom in on Earth and show you what's going on there. Satellites are really important. And did you know that right now, as we speak, 18 to 19,000 satellites are orbiting the Earth right now, active satellites. So these things are really cool, but this is just one way of many that we can see what's going on in space. I want to show you this. This is called a telescope. Have you ever seen one of these? Oh, they're really cool. Now, sometimes there's objects way out in space that we just can't see with the human eye. And in those events, we use this. And this helps us a lot study what's happening in the sky. But there's more ways. And that is with the human eye. And this one is actually happening this week. And you don't need a telescope. You don't need a satellite. All you need are your own eyes. You got to be in darkness. So let me qualify this because there's a couple things you have to do. One, you have to view it between 10 p.m. and just before sunrise. The best time is between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., but most of us are asleep by then. So 10 p.m. to dawn. Perseid meteor shower. Now, this week, we're going to be talking anywhere from basically 50 to 100 per hour. So there's a really good chance you'll be able to see them. But what you have to do is you have to go to an area that's dark. You can't stand under a street light. You can't stand under the studio lighting like what I have here. You have to go to a place where it's dark. Your back porch, shut off the lights and look up into the sky. And again, you have to do it after 10 o'clock. You may see one or two before that, but after 10 o'clock. And the rate's going to be really impressive. And it peaks this week. So that's one of the ways to look at it. Also, we talk a lot about the International Space Station flying overhead. And again, you don't need a telescope and you don't need a satellite. You can look at this with the human eye and you can check it out. It is really cool to see that go by. I saw it go by one time so low on the horizon, just like with sunrise and sunsets, when they're low on the horizon, you get that image of a bigger than what it really is sunset. Well, same thing happened with the International Space Station. It was so cool. This is another thing that you can, again, see with just the naked eye if you're going to be out there. So these are just a few of the things that you can enjoy in the night sky. You ask the question, how do we know? Well, there's some answers. And I've got some more answers for you on this question. Take it away, Brody.
Hi, I'm Brody. Why do we have rain?
That's Brody, my grandson. Cute kid. Yes, we're going to answer that question next week in science class. For Courtney, for myself, thanks for watching, and we hope you learned something.
Well, we've reached the end of this week's show here on Cloud to Ground. We hope you had some fun and learned a thing or two. I'm Jeremy Lewan. We hope to see you right back here next week.
Stormtracker 16, Cloud to Ground, is sponsored by DraftKings Casino, your new home of Lightning Link.